Son thinks he can get away with anything because I got remarried into a rich family, so when he gets his college girlfriend pregnant, he thinks he can get away stain-free, be an uninvolved father and get me to pay his GF out of his life. Now he claims I've changed after marriage because I'm paying for his baby's expenses from his college fund. It's been 4 years since I met and got married to my husband, Finn. I have a 19-year-old son, Ross, from my previous marriage. He is currently at college. I was first married to Ross's biological dad, John, who was extremely abusive. I was very young when I met him, and my relationship with him was a nightmare from the start. John was a textbook narcissist, always putting himself first and using manipulation to keep me under his control. I didn't see the signs at first. I was too naive to realize what was happening. He charmed me at the beginning, made me feel special, and swept me off my feet. It felt like love, but in reality it was all a trap. When I got pregnant with Ross, everything changed. John used my pregnancy as a way to tighten his grip on me. He saw my situation as leverage to keep me around and under his control. He would love bomb me, showering me with affection, gifts and attention, but it was all a way to manipulate me. Anytime I thought about leaving or standing up for myself, he would use guilt to make me stay. He made me believe I needed him and that leaving would hurt my baby. I was scared, confused and overwhelmed, so when he pushed me to get married I said yes. I thought it might make things better, but instead it was the biggest mistake of my life. What followed was 12 years of a very toxic relationship. He constantly put me down, made me feel small and tore apart my confidence bit by bit. I felt like I was walking on eggshells every single day. John had this way of twisting everything to make it my fault. Every problem, every mistake, every argument. He degraded me as a person, both privately and in front of others, and treated me like I wasn't worth anything. Living with him was a nightmare. He had a temper that could explode over the smallest things, and his anger was impossible to reason with. John couldn't keep a job because of his combative personality and constant need to pick fights with co-workers or bosses. That just added more stress to my life because I had to figure out how to make ends meet. On top of that, he was insanely jealous. He'd accuse me of things I didn't do, question my every move, and try to control who I talked to or spent time with. Slowly but surely, he isolated me from the people who cared about me. He drove a wedge between me and my close friends and family, cutting me off from the support I desperately needed. To this day, I regret not leaving him sooner. I sometimes think about all the years I spent trying to make things work, hoping things would change, but they never did. I stayed far longer than I should have and I paid a heavy price for it. When I finally found the courage to leave him, I knew it had to be for good. I moved far, far away with Ross to start fresh in the city where John couldn't reach us. Thankfully, I was granted full custody of my son, which was the one thing I truly cared about. Even though John was ordered by the court to pay child support, he never followed through. Honestly, I didn't care about the money. All I wanted was to keep my son safe and build a life where we could be free of John's shadow. Once we were away from my ex, it felt like a weight had been lifted off our shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt like we could breathe. I knew life as a single parent wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to give Ross the kind of life he deserved. I took on multiple jobs, working long hours to make ends meet. But every bit of effort was worth it. I wanted Ross to grow up feeling loved and supported, and I made sure to provide him with opportunities I never had. Back when I first met Finn, I honestly didn't think anything serious would come of it. He was this incredibly charming, well-off man who seemed to have it all together, a stark contrast to my life as a struggling single mom. I was juggling work, bills, and raising my son, Ross, on my own. I didn't think someone like Finn would have any real interest in someone like me, but I agreed to go on a date with him because a mutual friend insisted we'd be a great match. To my surprise, the date went really well. Finn was easy to talk to, warm and attentive. But even as I left that night, I didn't let myself get my hopes up. I figured it was a one-time thing and he'd move on, leaving me with nothing but a nice memory. After all, why would someone with his life, his wealth, his success want to keep dating someone like me? But Finn completely surprised me. Not only did he call me again, but he showed genuine interest in my life and who I was as a person. We started going on more dates and little by little I found myself falling for him. What truly melted my heart was how eager he was to meet Ross. Finn seemed truly interested in getting to know my son. When they finally met, it was like a huge weight lifted off my shoulders because they got along so well. Seeing Ross and Finn laugh and bond so easily was such a relief. And it made me realize that Finn wasn't just someone I could see myself with. He was also someone who could be a wonderful father figure to Ross. When Finn and I decided to get married, it wasn't just because I loved him deeply, but it was also because I saw how much he cared for my son and how naturally he stepped into the role of a step-parent. Finn has proven every single day since our wedding just how kind, supportive and thoughtful he is. He goes out of his way to make me feel cherished, and he's always there for Ross, whether it's giving advice, sharing a laugh, or showing up for the big moments in his life. I feel incredibly blessed to have him as both my husband and as a father to Ross. That being said, things haven't all been perfect. While Ross has fully accepted Finn and respects him like he's his own father, I've noticed a change in my son that sometimes leaves me feeling conflicted. Finn is extremely wealthy, and after we got married he made it clear that he loves spending his money on us. He showers us with gifts, designer clothes, the latest gadgets, and whatever we could possibly want. On top of that, Finn loves taking us on luxurious vacations to exotic places, the kind of trips I could only dream about before. I'll admit, I enjoy these things too. Who wouldn't? But my upbringing has left me with certain values that are hard to shake. I grew up learning how to stretch every dollar and save money wherever possible, and to never take anything for granted. Even after marrying Finn, I can't help but hold on to those habits. I still click coupons, compare prices, and think twice before buying something expensive. Russ, on the other hand, has embraced this new lifestyle without hesitation. He's living the kind of life I could never have given him on my own. And while I'm happy that he's finally getting everything he's ever wanted, sometimes I worry that he's becoming a bit spoiled. He started to expect the finer things in life. And while I don't want to dampen his happiness, there are moments when I feel like he's losing touch with the values I worked so hard to teach him. For example, on his 18th birthday, Ross insisted on buying a very high-end luxury car for himself. A car that cost more than I had ever earned in an entire year as a single mom. I immediately said no. It was too extravagant and unnecessary, and I didn't feel like an 18-year-old needed a car like that. But Ross wasn't ready to take no for an answer. Instead, he went straight to Finn and asked him to buy the car. Finn, being as generous as he is, gave in to Ross's request, thinking it would make him happy. I didn't want to start a conflict, so I reluctantly went along with it, hoping Ross would appreciate such a massive gift and act responsibly. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. On the very night Ross got the car, he went out with friends to celebrate at a club. He got drunk, far more than he could handle, and ended up crashing the car on his way home. I was terrified when I got the call, grateful that no one was seriously hurt, but heartbroken that Ross had been so careless. He was arrested that night, and while he didn't serve jail time, he had to complete community service as part of his sentence. What shocked me the most, though, wasn't the accident or even the arrest. It was Ross's attitude afterwards. He showed no real remorse for what happened. He brushed it off like it wasn't a big deal, blaming the situation on bad luck rather than his poor decisions. This incident was a wake-up call for me, but it didn't seem to change anything for Ross. Since then, his spending habits have spiraled out of control. Finn and I gave him a credit card for his monthly expenses with a set limit to cover necessities and occasional extras. But Ross constantly pushes those boundaries. He spends thousands of dollars every month buying new video games, expensive watches, and other unnecessary luxuries. When his card runs out of funds, he comes to us asking for more, often pressuring Finn to top up the account. Finn has a hard time saying no to him, and I feel caught in the middle trying to enforce boundaries that Ross simply doesn't respect. What hurts me the most, though, is how his behavior towards others has changed. Ross used to be a kind and thoughtful person, someone who respected everyone regardless of their background or job. I raised him to treat people with kindness no matter their circumstances. But over the past 2 years, I've noticed a troubling shift. He's become dismissive and even rude towards people he sees as beneath him. For example, whenever we go out to eat, he talks down to servers at restaurants, acting as if they're not worth his time. He snaps at them for the smallest mistakes and doesn't even bother to say please or thank you. At home, he's just as disrespectful to our house staff, treating them like they're invisible or worse, like they're there to serve him and nothing else. Finn and I have both tried to talk to him about this. We've explained how important it is to treat everyone with dignity, no matter their job or social status. But Ross refuses to take us seriously. He brushes off our concerns, saying it's not a big deal how he talks to people from the lower class, and the people in those jobs signed up for it, as if that excuses his behavior. It's been heartbreaking to see this side of him. This isn't the Ross I raised. I don't recognize this entitled, dismissive young man who seems to have forgotten the struggles we went through together. To make things worse, I've also noticed that Ross dates a lot of girls. He's always involved with someone new. About 4 months ago, he introduced me to a girl named Carly. She was blonde, sweet, and had a quiet confidence about her that stood out. Out of all the girlfriends Ross has introduced me to, Carly was the one who left a lasting impression. She seemed intelligent, kind, and down-to-earth, someone who genuinely cared about my son. I had hoped that maybe this time Ross had found someone who could help ground him, someone who could bring out the best in him. Unfortunately, not even 2 months later, Ross and Carly broke up, and when I asked why, I learned it was because Ross had cheated on her. I was disappointed but not entirely surprised, given his recent pattern of behavior. Even after their breakup, Carly and I stayed connected on social media. She would occasionally like or comment on my posts and I appreciated the small interactions. She seemed like a genuinely good person and I felt bad about things that ended between her and Ross. This brings us to the present. Earlier this week, Carly reached out to me directly and she sent me a message asking if we could meet in person because she had something important to tell me. Her message had a sense of urgency which made me curious. She also specifically asked me not to mention anything about this meeting to Ross. Carly explained that only after meeting her could I decide whether or not to talk to my son about it. I was intrigued and a little worried. What could she possibly need to tell me that required this level of secrecy? I agreed to meet her, and 3 days ago we sat down together for the first time since she and Ross broke up. Carly looked nervous as she started to explain to me that she's pregnant, and Ross is the father. Apparently, she had taken multiple pregnancy tests last month and confirmed that she was expecting. She told me she had already informed Ross about the situation but he was refusing to accept it. As Carly spoke, tears welled up in her eyes and she explained that she had never been someone who casually dated or slept around. Ross was the only man she had been intimate with in a long time and she had genuinely loved him. She admitted how heartbroken she was when she found out he had cheated on her, but even then, she never imagined that she would end up pregnant after their breakup. Carly went on to reveal that Ross had been pressuring her to get an abortion. Her voice trembled as she explained how torn she felt, caught between what my son wanted and what her own heart and beliefs were telling her. Carly comes from a deeply religious background, and for her, abortion wasn't something she could bring herself to consider lightly. She told me how scared she was, not just of the decision itself, but of the pressure Ross had been putting on her to go through with it. What hurt the most was hearing how my son had been treating her. According to Carly, Ross had called her a gold digger and other cruel names accusing her of trying to baby trap him. He even gave her an ultimatum. Either she terminated the pregnancy or she kept the baby but could never count on him for support financially, emotionally or otherwise. He made it clear that if she chose to have the child, he would completely wash his hands of the situation. I was speechless. I couldn't believe the harshness of Ross's words and actions. This wasn't the son I thought I had raised. I had taught him to take responsibility for his actions, to be kind and respectful to others and to always treat people with empathy. But hearing Carly's account made me realize just how far he had strayed from those values. Through tears streaming down her face, Carly told me why she had come to me for help. She admitted that she couldn't bring herself to have an abortion, but she also didn't know how she would raise a baby on her own. She confessed that she had no financial means to support a child, and her family, once they found out about her pregnancy, would likely ostracize her. She was terrified that they would force her to give up the baby and the thought of her child ending up in foster care or being raised by strangers broke her heart. That's when Carly said something that completely took me by surprise. She asked if I would adopt a baby. She explained that she was willing to give up the child and sign over full custody to me if I was willing to take on the responsibility. Carly said she was even willing to never be in the child's life if it meant causing more confusion or instability. The only thing she wanted was for the baby to grow up in a safe, loving environment and she believed that my husband Finn and I could provide that. I know this is a lot to ask, she said, her voice breaking as tears streamed down her face. But I know you're a good person. I saw how much you care about your son. I know you'd care about this baby too. I sat there in shock trying to process everything she had just told me. My heart broke for her when I heard her words. Part of me wanted to immediately say yes and to reassure Carly that her baby would be safe and loved no matter what, but another part of me was overwhelmed by the enormity of what she was asking. Adopting a baby is a life-changing decision, one that would affect not just me and Finn but also Ross. I knew exactly what she was going through. As a woman I could see that she legitimately cared about her unborn child and was ready to even give it up just so that her child could have a good life with us. Gently but firmly, I asked her to forget about all of it for just a moment. I told her to think only about herself and her baby and I asked her the most important question of all, what do you truly want? Carly admitted that she wished her pregnancy had happened under different circumstances, at a better time in her life when she was more prepared. Even though it's not the way I imagined it, she said, her voice steady with conviction. I've come to terms with it. I've accepted that this is happening and I'm okay with it now. If it were up to just me and if the circumstances were different, I would keep this baby. I already love them. Hearing this, I felt a lump rise in my throat. I told Carly that I needed time. Time to think, time to talk to my husband, Finn, and most importantly time to confront my son. So yesterday, Finn and I confronted Ross about the situation. At first, my son tried to deny the whole thing but I told him that I had already met Carly, that I had seen the pregnancy tests and that I had heard the full story from her. At that point, his denial crumbled and he switched tactics. He began blaming Carly for the pregnancy, saying that it was her responsibility to take precautions. She should have been on birth control, he argued as if that excused him from any accountability. I felt my anger rising, but I kept my voice firm and calm. "Ross," I said, "it takes two people to create a child. You can't just put all the blame on her. You're just as responsible for what happened as she is." Ross scoffed, his tone dripping with indifference. "I don't want anything to do with that kid. She's knowingly trying to trap me. Honestly, why can't you just pay Carly some hush money or something? Women these days only care about money anyway. She probably got pregnant on purpose just to get a slice of our money." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My son, the child I had raised, struggled for and loved with every fiber of my being, was suggesting that I should bribe Carly to terminate her pregnancy as if it was nothing. He was speaking so nonchalantly, as though Carly had somehow become pregnant on her own, as if he had played no role in the situation at all. My son continued to call Carly a few choice words, which I don't want to repeat here. Hearing this, a deep searing anger bubbled up inside me, one I couldn't hold back. Before I even realized what I was doing, I slapped Ross hard across the face. The room fell into a stunned silence. Ross stared at me wide-eyed and speechless, holding his cheek in disbelief. Even Finn, who had been trying to reason with him moments before, sat frozen, unsure of what to say. "You have no right to call yourself a man," I said, staring him directly in the eyes. "A real man takes responsibility for his actions. A real man doesn't run away from his mistakes or blame someone else for his choices. And a real man certainly doesn't treat the mother of his child like trash." Ross opened his mouth as if to protest, but I raised a hand, cutting him off. "I understand if you don't want kids," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "but that conversation is over. It's out of the window because guess what? You are going to be a father whether you like it or not. Maybe you should have thought about that before and used the if you weren't ready for the consequences." My son's face turned a deep shade of red, the embarrassment and anger unmistakable. He opened and closed his mouth repeatedly, struggling to form a response. Before he could say anything, my husband, who had been quiet and contemplative throughout my confrontation, finally spoke up. "Ross," he said, "your mother is right. Carly has made it clear that she wants to keep this baby, and that's her choice. It's her body. It's not up to you or anyone else to tell her what to do with it. If you don't want to be involved in this child's life, that's one thing. But trying to push her into something she doesn't want is not only wrong, it's downright cruel. It's time for you to grow up and face the consequences of your actions." Ever since then, my son has refused to speak to either of us. He claims that we are wrong for what we have told him, accusing us of trying to force him into becoming a father. He insists that by supporting Carly's decision, we are somehow undermining him and siding against him. So Reddit, AITA, Update 1. Answering some of the most asked questions. Yes, we will definitely be getting a paternity test done to confirm the paternity of the child. But honestly, I truly believe Carly. I feel really bad for her. She's a young woman who never expected her life to turn out this way. And while I understand that Ross might be feeling conflicted or unsure, I can't ignore the reality of Carly's situation. To anyone who's worried about her, please don't worry. I know how it feels to be a single mother, so I'll do everything in my power to help her. I know the hardships of being a single mother all too well. Having to raise Ross on my own without support from his father wasn't easy. I had to make countless sacrifices, and I understand what it means to put your child's needs above your own. Carly is now in a similar position, and I won't let her feel like she's alone in this. She has me in her corner, and I will make sure she feels supported and safe. No, I'm not pushing Ross to marry Carly or try to rekindle their relationship. I would never try to force him into something he doesn't want. However, what I do expect from him is responsibility and accountability. Carly didn't get pregnant by herself. Ross was just as involved in this situation as she was. Even if he doesn't want to raise the child or be a part of its life, the very least he can do is show some respect and kindness to Carly. She's going through a lot emotionally, physically, and mentally, and he has a duty to acknowledge that as a decent human being. For now, Finn and I are planning to talk to a lawyer and explore our options. We need to figure out what's best for everyone involved, especially the baby. Update 2. It's been quite a few months since I last updated anything here and I have been really busy. For anyone who is still following this story, I wanted to update you all that Carly has given birth this week. Unfortunately, her parents refused to come and be by her side in the delivery room, which really broke my heart for her, but I was there holding her hand, offering my support and making sure she wasn't alone. It wasn't easy for her, but I am proud of how strong she was through the whole experience. After the baby's birth, the first thing we did was get a paternity test done, and as it turns out, my son is indeed the father. Honestly, I didn't even feel like a test was needed because the baby looked just like my son when he was born. There's no denying the resemblance. It was a bit surreal though, seeing my grandchild in my arms and knowing that this little one is part of our family despite the complicated circumstances. Anyway, I have now moved Carly into my place and she is currently nursing and recovering while me and Finn are helping her take care of her son. Ross, as expected, hasn't even checked in with her and has refused to come and see his son. But you know what? Finn and I aren't going to chase him. He has made it clear that he wants no part in this and we are not going to force him to step up if he doesn't want to. We've let him be and we're focusing on what's best for Carly and the baby now. If Ross ever comes around, we'll deal with it. But for now, we're moving forward without his involvement. Also, Carly has decided to keep the baby and we have agreed to help her every step of the way. She can stay with us for as long as she wants since her family has basically kicked her out and are refusing to accept her. Finn and I are genuinely happy to have her and the baby with us. Yes, it's been overwhelming at times, but when I look at that little face, it makes everything worth it. Carly and the baby are part of our family now. Now, coming to the child support payment, we have decided to use some of the money we have set aside for Ross to get him through college on paying the child support for his son. As you can imagine, Ross is furious about it and feels like it's unfair we are using his set-aside college fund. He fears that there won't be money left to send him through the rest of his years of college, but I have sternly told him that if that's the case, then he can get a college loan and work on paying it off all on his own. My son needs to understand that the world doesn't revolve around him and life isn't always fair. Update 3. Wow, I see a lot of comments under my post after my recent update. I've noticed that many of you agree with what I did in terms of using Ross's college fund to cover the child support payments. I did this to teach my son responsibility. However, my son actually told me that I had changed since I remarried and that he despises me now, just because I'm paying child support to Carly from his college funds. Those words stung more than I'd like to admit. To hear your child, the person you've raised with love and care, say something like that, it's painful. So I straight up told him, guess what? You've changed too. The son I raised would have been kinder to his ex and would have shown more consideration for his own son. We've never asked you to help Carly or the baby, and we certainly aren't forcing you to be involved. But paying child support, that's the legal and moral thing to do. If you have a problem with that, then that's something you'll have to figure out on your own. You can despise me, you can hate me, but as a woman and as a mother, I would never abandon Carly and my grandson like you have. I'm sure this conversation didn't change anything in the moment, but I'm hoping that one day Ross will understand that this is about teaching him a critical lesson in accountability and responsibility. It's something he desperately needs to learn, but right now, he's just angry with us and refuses to see things from our perspective.